friends, welcome once again to the Perfect Bound Podcast. This is a podcast all about anything and everything comic books and comics related, brought to you by the Panel Jumper and Comics Dungeon. My name is Ben. With me, as always, is Cole Hornaday.
I love you guys. I never tell you enough how much I love you guys. You're just so awesome.
Nicole Lamb.
Yes, hi.
And Mr. Chris Casso.
I got nothing.
All right. And we are here in the lovely and beautiful Comics Dungeon. And if you're joining us on the video feed like it's live, and you haven't heard us before, my name is Ben Lawrence. I am the director and one of the co-producers of the web series The Panel Jumper, all about comic book history and lore. Cole Hornaday over there, he's a veritable man about town, but he's also the writer and host of The Panel Jumper. You can find all of that at thepaneljumper.com. Mr. Chris Casso here is the manager here at Comics Dungeon and basically the brain. Kind of knows everything. If I have a question, I go to Chris. He's got an answer for me.
He's the living conduit.
He's also a man of many words, except when we're all staring right at him. All right. and Nicole Lamb, are you still the events manager here? Or?
I am the events coordinator.
Events coordinator.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and the mail order specialist.
The mail order specialist. And there's probably quite a bit of stuff that you guys mail out here.
Yep,
I've seen the piles of the packages.
Yeah. We have a web store, a Shopify store, and we also have subscription customers that get their stuff mailed out to them.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
They have to leave town, but they still love us.
All right, so keep that in mind, Internet people. If you want something, go to comicsdungeon.com. Let's get started with today's episode. The first topic of our bit is pulped comics. Now, these are comics that have been released and then redacted and destroyed. And so
recalled.
Yes. So what are well, that was just a very cursory explanation. Can someone give me a more thorough definition of what a pulped comic is?
Sure. Oftentimes there are misprints, and oftentimes there's content that the publisher regrets. So they will contact distributors if it's already made it to the comic book stores, if it's already made it to us, and demand that they are pulled off the shelf and shredded, destroyed. Sometimes they catch it before it hits distribution, but accidents happen, and sometimes they get out. And it could be as harmless as, oh, we accidentally reprinted the first 5 pages and you didn't get the full story. Or, oh, like all the pages just like were printed with bad ink and you can't see something. But sometimes there's an actual story content or a little controversy, and they don't want it getting out there.
Well, either way, it can be a really, really pricey oversight, whether it's a printer error or it's a content boo-boo. I was inspired to introduce this subject because I recently read Brian Cronin's book called Was Superman a Spy? Cronin writes a regular column, has since 2005 for the blog Comics Should Be Good. He's got a regular series called Comic Book Urban Legends Revealed. So this book is primarily dealing with, the more famous comic book urban legends and sort of unraveling them and giving you the true story behind the story. The one that popped up first for me was in the previous episode we talked about the Elseworlds comics that DC capitalized on for a while, which were alternate reality stories along the lines of Marvel's What If, but much more character-centric, particularly with Batman or Superman. But they tried to branch out and there was an edition. They had an 80-page giant that they were producing in the 90s. And in that particular 80-page giant special, there was a piece by Kyle Baker called Letitia Lerner, Superman's Babysitter. And I was always very fond of Kyle Baker. He did some of my favorite comedy books like Why I Hate Saturn and Cowboy Wally Show, stuff like that. But he did this short piece, and it's basically the premise of Letitia Lerner, Superman's Babysitter, is Mom and Pa Kent have been trying to raise this super baby who's been distracting them from their personal life, so they want to hire a babysitter so they can, have some time alone, which is really funny because they're depicted as these old, pruny, codgerly types. But that was, and they need to get away to a hotel and be intimate.
Everybody needs love. Come on.
Everybody needs love. But Paul Levitz, the publisher of DC at the time, took offense because there's a sequence in it where Super Baby flies into the microwave and Letitia Lerner, turns on the microwave. But he's Super Baby, so
On
that's
purpose?
I do believe so, yeah. So they recalled it and they pulped it, right? But the issue had actually already been sent to the overseas distributors and was, on the stands in the UK and parts throughout Europe. That particular edition wound up, shooting up in value. And then a couple years later, they actually decided to reprint the story in a hardbound edition, a hardbound book called Bizarro. Remember what it's called?
Bizarro Comics?
Bizarro Comics. And the story wound up winning an Eisner Award for Best Short Story. Mm-hmm. The original 80-page giant is, I looked it up, and people are trying to sell it on eBay for like $400 to $600, but it's not going for that. And the other story was, there it is right there. Yeah.
Bizarro
that have-
Comics and Bizarro World. So I
Yeah.
forget which
Yeah.
one, but it's the same. It's an anthology where they got indie creators to do weird stories.
Okay.
So yeah,
So I take it that book that Nicole you just received does not have the baby microwave scene in
it
it.
might.
I think
It's
it
this one or
does.
the other one. We have both.
Yeah,
copies.
no, but it isn't
Yeah,
one.
no,
of
I
them.
think it's that edition that has it, and it's a fun little story. The other one that came up in Mr. Cronin's book was a one-shot that was tied in with the Universe X series. It was Universe X Spidey, and Bob Harris was he the editor at Marvel at that time?
Sounds right.
Yeah, it was like editor-in-chief. And Al Milgrom, who used to be a mainstay writer and illustrator at Marvel. There it is, yeah. Kyle Baker at his best. It's a fun little story. But Al Milgrom drew this story with old aging Peter Parker, and in the background of the story there is a bookshelf, and on the spines of the bookshelf, Al Milgrom wrote on each of the spines, Harris, haha, he's gone. Good riddance to bad rubbish. He was a nasty SOB. Well, they recalled it and pulped it. Or so they thought. It was all in agreement with the printers, and then there was an error at the printers, and it went to print. In a reprint edition, supposedly, they tried to catch it and prevent that, and it got printed again. And in subsequent reprint editions, it's always been there. So I think they must have wasted thousands and thousands of dollars in making an error and catching an error and catching again, and then But it's pretty amazing. But there was the
League of Gentlemen.
Oh, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah.
What about
So
Alan Moore
Moore's
and
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Kevin O'Neill?
Yep, Kevin O'Neill. Issue number 5 had a authentic advertisement for a Marvel brand douche from the early part of the 20th century.
And this is actually a real
A
advertisement.
real
correct?
advertisement.
Yeah, because
and it was just called the Marvel brand
Yeah,
back then.
yeah.
So Paul Levitz, ordered the entire print run destroyed over concerns that this could lead to litigation with their main rival, Marvel. And of course, some of them made it overseas. So, that's a common story. And Alan Moore was just he went ahead and did the Miracle Douche recall headline in Top 10 Comics. So he was, making fun of a little bit of stuff there.
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah, so that's a great one,
that one.
Then the other one that was also worth bringing up was 2008 Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin.
one of my all-time favorites.
Oh yeah, they had an issue number 10 where a bunch of people were swearing, like some criminals trying to kill Batgirl and Batgirl herself, and they had put black bars over redacted it,
Yeah.
but apparently they still took the time to write the words in, and then the black bars were not black enough, and you could see some very naughty words. And
they were derogatory. And they
yep. And there was like the F word and stuff like that. So let's see, slightly different shades of ink were used and leaving vulgar words just readable. So yeah, so stuff like that happens. The other one that we mentioned briefly was Wolverine number 131, where the script called for a little narrative box that said the assassin Sabretooth, and then somebody changed it to the killer Sabretooth, and on the fax, some of the words got cut off, and it got changed into a racist slur.
By the letterer.
By the letterer, because he just was doing what he thought he saw. And it didn't get proofread.
Yeah, if you're the letterer and you see that word come along and you read it a certain way, are you not going to call the writer or the editor?
I'm thinking about how under the gun a lot of these creators are, especially writers. I mean, they're not making what inkers or illustrators or writers are making, and they've got, they're cranking out pages, and this is before digital, right? So they're doing it by hand.
Yeah. Well, and also on top of that, like I think that's a great thing to think of, but also it was a particular racial slur that you don't hear as often.
Right.
And this guy could have just been like, whatever, that's a word, I'm putting it in.
Not even knowing what it meant.
Yeah,
Oblivious to its
so it's just kind of like,
significance.
oh, okay.
Got
It's one that I don't hear often. It's not a great word for those of Jewish descent. So it's just like, yeesh.
Yeah. So going back on that lovely subject, going back to this Bizarro Superman, Cole, were you saying that the baby microwave scene was the reason why that issue was pulped?
Yeah.
All right. So it actually was. I found the scene, and it is actually an unintentional microwaving by the babysitter. He crawls in while she is not looking.
Got her back turned, right?
Yeah, she has her back turned, and when Mr. and Mrs. Kent get back, I guess they see Clark Kent see the baby in the microwave, and they offer to pay her double. So I'm kind of wondering about the punchline.
Yeah.
It's just that she survived the night with the baby.
Survived the night. Yeah.
It's this whole thing played out in the Incredibles. The whole scene with the baby going crazy and
Jack
the
Jack.
babies.
Yeah.
Jack Jack. So yeah.
The Jack short, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right. Oh, do we have any other examples of pulped comics?
I
think that's it.
A lot of them
I
are...
think it's interesting that it's Mr. Levitz who was, exercising his editorial strengths there and wasting a lot of people's time and money.
There's aspects. Levitz, I've heard, was often like basically like a gentleman in many ways. So things that were just even partially like, oh, that's not good. They would just knock it right out.
Okay.
So it's like I don't think there's too much of a prude aspect, but certainly a lot may have been unnecessary to get overreacted on.
For the ones that didn't get recalled immediately and are still in circulation, do they go for a premium?
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, like I said, I looked it up on eBay. They're trying to sell the Elseworlds 80-page giant. I saw dealers selling it anywhere from $200 to $500, but they're not getting that for it.
Right.
People are buying it, but it's for under $100.
Right.
Which still is a pretty penny to pay for a relatively new comic book. That was printed in, 2000? I don't recall.
That sounds about right.
2000 something.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think that the Spidey issue is in demand.
Right.
I don't think anybody cares.
I sometimes collect misprinted books that were like badly cut, so they're worth nothing. They are worth nothing, but they're come in like strange jigsaw puzzle shapes, and I just love it as a reminder that everyone screws up.
Yeah.
Well, I remember as a kid finding comics on the spinner racks that had double covers, and like, ooh,
That still kind of happens from time to time.
oh, that's going to be worth something. No, it's not. But what would be intriguing was when it was a cover that was not for the actual, it was a miscover. It was not for the right book, or it had two covers and one was for the wrong book. Right. But
It's interesting how much, what variations of mistakes are sought after. Like, it's no, I collect baseball cards, and there are a number of errors on certain cards through the era where I collected, and some of them are worth less. Some of them are like really, really sought after and really, really desired.
well, have you ever heard of the Topps Star Wars C-3PO card?
I have not.
Oh, yeah, this was a famous card that was intentionally graphic. That someone at the printing house gave C-3PO, or let's put it this way, endowed C-3PO with an attachment that you don't see in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, and that card went out to the public, and that's like a several $100 card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So let's
Extended
say,
edition C-3PO.
let's say, all right. Let's say you have one of these pulped comics and you want to get it evaluated. You send it to the CGC, the Certified Guarantee Company, and so this is a company that grades and encapsulates comics. And like I mentioned, I collect baseball cards. I only have one. There's a company that does this for baseball cards. One of the companies, I guess maybe there's not just one. PSA, Professional Sports Authenticator. I only have one card. I bought this card off of eBay. It's a 1989 Topps Ken Griffey Jr. Traded. And it's encapsulated. It's like it's got the plastic thing. It's got the little the near mint grade on the top. So it's legit. But I didn't realize it was going to be in this plastic case when I bought it. So now I'm kind of annoyed because I want to put it in my notebook with all of my other Ken Griffey Jr. cards. But I don't also want to take it out of the case because, well, it might be worth more in the case. And they are worth more in the case. If you look for cards on eBay, the ones that have been graded and are in the plastic case are worth a lot more than the ones that are not. So comics have this thing, the CGC, and let's talk about grading and encapsulating.
Yeah. I'm not a fan.
I think
You're not a fan.
Chris and I were discussing this a couple weeks ago, and I think he said it best. It's not everything is museum worthy.
Right.
You know,
It fetishizes them too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it takes the joy out of whatever that item is. There was a video going around from Rolling Stone magazine of Rick Springfield's Star Wars collection, and Rick Springfield, rocker from the '80s, collected all the vintage Kenner Star Wars figures, and he has them all in these
CGC.
Sealed containers with the grading on them. I'm like, I just think it's just kind of sad.
Now that's actually something new for me. They encapsulate toys, not just comics?
They do it for loose figures. They will take your He-Man action figure and his sword and his shield and whatever and encase them in a little lucite block.
They probably don't want to do that with my He-Man figure because the sword is actually attached to He-Man with a little bit of gum because the fingers
Which
broke.
makes it that much more charming and it has a personal history to it.
Exactly.
But those things you have encapsulated, they're never going to have that because now they're museum quality.
Well, but for the stuff that you've been finding online, like that's just a way to guarantee a certain grade of things.
Right.
And a lot of times when people are doing online sales, you know, are the pictures accurate?
Sure,
Or did you
you're
just
right.
pull a stock one? What are you going to get?
There's
this
a
way?
practical element that I do
There is-
appreciate.
there is that. And so a lot of people will do that if they're looking at a potential sale in the future because they can guarantee that to whatever customer base they might have.
I guess I can wholly support it for something from the golden age.
Right.
You know, Action Comics #1, Batman #1.
It
all the-
should be preserved.
You're not going
Yeah.
to like pull that out and
Right.
be like, let me just
Yeah,
flip through
no,
this.
because you're gonna just by touching it, you're gonna depreciate the value of it. You know, because those things are so fragile.
Yeah.
But you know,
And I understand doing it for things of
DK3.
I understand doing it for things of personal value
Yeah,
too at
yeah.
times, you know, especially like if you had another copy, but you're like, because we send things into CGC for customers at times. We're kind of a middleman for that. And somebody had one done because their brother had worked on it. I'm like, that's
Great.
cool. You want
Yeah.
it, it's like a family heirloom now.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's pretty awesome. It's just that it's an expensive process.
I'm sure.
And if-
How much is it on average?
there's
Do you
different
know?
rates depending on what you're getting graded.
Give
If
us
you
a
do it in
ballpark.
bulk, couple comics, bare minimum with shipping, $80 to $100. But that's
Wow.
like modern.
For some comics who might not even be worth that much.
Oh, we've seen those gone through. I've seen like some random issues that are like, that's not even worth a quarter now because nobody knows about it, and you basically paid about $80 for that to be, you know, just slabbed.
Somebody's playing the long game.
Right. But, you know, if you're getting, there's bulk rates and there's different values depending on if you're getting things from the modern era, the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, stuff like that, magazines, whatever. So, you know, sometimes you could work it out so that you get your most out of the package you sent. But it's still like, unless you know as a fact that you're going to turn those items around for a bare minimum of $50 in that bulk, then it's not quite worth the turnaround.
And there's something to be said for, you know, a licensed authority grading something. I'm always intrigued by by that process.
Right. They're not always that accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they can be pretty accurate, but it's a number of people grading them, and there's different scales. John, our appraiser and buyer at the store, who's been doing it for over 30 years, who's got a great eye for this kind of stuff. He's sent some stuff in, and it's just sort of like, yeah, that's about right. That's a little bit not as good, and it's just different opinions.
Sure.
It's all eyeballing.
Got it.
So yeah.
So in the process is you have a comic, you think it's worth something. Let's say DK3. You're playing the long game because it's Frank Miller.
That's a super duper long game there, son.
Right.
So you bring your Batman comic into the Comics Dungeon. I want this graded, Chris. You package it up so it doesn't get damaged in some way, I'm assuming, and send it off to New York, LA, Kansas.
I'm not the one that does it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
CGC.
Off to the magical land
All right,
of CGC.
off to CGC, where it is evaluated.
CGC Central.
Where it is evaluated by some dude who thinks he knows something about comics.
There's often a big queue, too, so sometimes it could be 4 or 5 months before they get to
Whoa.
it. Yeah. Sometimes they'll work through their queue, and it's much faster. There's priority things you could do as well.
It's quite a racket.
But yeah, it's... So yeah, but
So they grade it. They encase it in carbonite and slap a label on it and send it back to you.
It could be very valuable too because they will catch things. Because sometimes people restore comics and they don't know if they bought a restored edition. So like, let's say there's some weird it lost some color over time. Somebody went in with a marker and filled that in so it looks like a perfect edition, and they will catch that. And when you get your comic back, it has a different color label and it says restored. So that's a thing. Sometimes, like really sneaky, people will replace the staples in a comic, and that's the thing. Like John caught that one time. Like, how do you do that? And he's just like, they weren't rusty. It's just like, ooh, detective work.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like there's all sorts of things like that. Sometimes unintentional. Sometimes people will trim the edge of a comic to make it straighter. They'll catch that.
Right. So these CGC graders, they go through it page by page with a fine-tooth comb looking for these kinds of things.
I don't know the full detail on that.
Huh.
I would kind of assume, though, if you're paying that much, they better be.
Yeah, exactly.
I did want to just briefly talk about restoration, because that was a thing in the 90s, and I don't hear about people doing it anymore.
You'll hear about it, but it's going to happen sometimes.
It still does?
Yeah, unintentionally sometimes too. Sometimes people just don't know what they're doing is not a great thing. That despite a comic being damaged, you should leave it alone because that's still in its original form.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's always malicious. you
Right.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
But is it?
Yeah.
But it is still a thing, because
pops up.
I've not heard of it for quite some time. I remember, back in the '90s, there were restoring organizations that would be at the comic book shows and stuff like that. And I always was kind of puzzled by that, because watch Antiques Roadshow. They're always going to, turn their nose up at anything that's been restored from its original condition or repainted.
Those are some of the most heartbreaking stories.
But
you
there's
see
that also exists in the culture of comic books.
Yeah. Some people will want that original one, even if it's in less worse condition, technically. you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to a segment we sometimes do called Rapid Fire. This is where I ask a question to each one of our panels, and they have to give me the first answer off the top of their head. Sometimes I give them advance warning. Sometimes I don't. This time I didn't, because I just thought of these today because I wanted more content. All right.
Fire away!
Nicole, what movie or TV version of your favorite hero or team was perfect? Some of these questions I made up, some I got off the comic book subreddit. I just want to make sure I don't get caught if anybody listens to this. And I'm also giving you time to think.
I don't know.
Does anybody else have an answer?
Can you ask the question again?
What movie or TV version of your favorite hero or, super team was perfect?
Spider-Man 3.
Tobey Maguire Spider-Man era?
No, 2. Sorry, the one with Doc Ock. Not 3. 3's terrible. Sorry, Spider-Man 2.
Although I do think Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman was a great, as far as embodying a character.
He was in 2.
3.
Oh, he was in 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
But prior to the Avengers film, I thought Spider-Man 2 was the best superhero movie ever made. And I still think it's pretty terrific. But when Avengers came out, I thought, now that's a darn fine superhero movie right there.
Yeah, I mean that was good. I don't have so much of an investment in like Marvel and DC to have something be like, oh, ever since I was a little girl, you know, it was just like ever since like 5 years ago.
But prior to that was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I thought that was the perfect adaptation.
Wait, which one?
The first one.
The first one.
Okay. Not Secret of the Ooze. Not the one where they go back to feudal Japan.
All right. Cole Hornaday.
Oh, I already got one.
That's fine.
Okay.
Technically, that was Nicole's. But I'm
It
going
was
to give
Nicole's,
you this one.
and I tromped all over Nicole.
Theoretically, here's a theoretical question. Would Bruce Wayne have still become Batman had his parents not been killed?
No.
No.
He had no motivation. No. He would be a wealthy, ne'er-do-well playboy, and he probably would have become an arms dealer because, you know, or something like that. He probably would have become
Tony
a very...
Stark?
Well, actually,
Tony Stark.
And they've explored that in the Elseworlds comics.
Oh, have they?
Oh, yeah. They there's that his parents dying in Crime Alley and witnessing the death of his parents, that was a galvanizing experience, and that's what shaped him into the obsessive creature he is, which is another one of those elements that I think is going to be lost in what DC's doing with the movies. I'm concerned that it will be lost. That obsessive nature of his... And that's why he needs Robin. Robin tempers him.
All right. Robin is his Morty to Batman's Rick. All right. Chris. I just love Rick and Morty. Think about it.
I need you, Morty.
All right. Chris, we talked about how Deadpool is changing the movie game because it's an R-rated movie, and it's now encouraging other movies to be R-rated. Mm-hmm. What are some comics that changed the industry?
Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, The Killing Joke, Watchmen. I mean, there's a huge list.
And how, like, briefly, we don't have to
get
get into this too much, but briefly, how did they change the industry?
Oh man, that's his entire episode. Dark Knight reintroduced a darker version of Batman as a superhero, and you know, different from the Adam West version, and brought in a whole new generation of readers to appreciate this kind of Batman story. Watchmen was, you know, superheroes as deconstructionist literature, and what else was the other one I said? Killing Joke. As just a dark piece of fiction, you know. Mostly, anytime Alan Moore does something, it changes the industry in some way.
All right,
it's all right. Yeah.
Cool. Apologies for putting you on the spot, but I wanted to actually, you know, prove to our audience that you are the encyclopedic brain here.
Those are very kind of. I wish I could come up with better versions
like,
of those.
A saga is something that's changed the industry, getting people who wouldn't read comic books into comic books.
Yeah.
And having this whole like the Image publishing,
Walking Dead, as you know, part of that. You know, yes, very.
But I think the books that Chris was pointing out from the 80s, they really elevated comic books to a literary status.
Right.
Ooh, really good example. Sorry,
They started teaching those books in college courses.
The Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams run of Green Arrow and Green Lantern, Green Arrow, because of all the social political aspects brought in, and some people credit that as the beginning of actually the age of comics that Dark Knight and Watchmen benefit from.
It's when comic books grew up.
Better one.
Yep.
All right. Well, perhaps we'll revisit that more when I need a subject to talk about. Let's move on to book report, everybody. Cole Hornaday, let's start with you. What did you read this week?
Well, I'm a little bit behind, but I wanted to talk about the latest issue I read of DC's Constantine the Hellblazer. You know, I've gone on record more than one time vilifying the TV series, missing the lengthy run of the original Vertigo series, and I am still thoroughly enjoying this book. It's tempered in a way because, you know, there's essentially no more Vertigo. There's no more adult horror line out of DC. But this is still a very mature story, and the essence of Constantine is there. But gosh darn it, if there might not be tones of the TV series that are in this that they're making work. Because for the first time, I realized in reading this story, and it's not particularly a new story, a plot line, but there's a sentiment to him that is a lot more human than I've ever seen before, and I'm totally digging it. He's vulnerable for the first time than I can ever recall. he's still a libertine. He's still a hedonist. He's still a narcissist. But there's a quality about him that's likable, that's vulnerable, and I'm really enjoying watching where this book goes. So it's Ming Doyle and James Tinian IV writing it, and Riley Rossmo finishes in cover. Brian Level breakdowns. Yeah, I hope that it I don't know how well it's selling. How well is it doing?
It's doing all right for us.
It's doing all right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I like the inside, the Rossmo inside, because it looks a little less him, actually. It's like
I'm not familiar with his
He's
stuff.
experimenting.
Yeah, I think he's kind of experimenting a little bit. It's just like, it's kind of cleaner.
Yeah.
But yet it's still got his style in it, and the creep factor is really good. Yeah. He does a lot of horror comics, so it makes sense
really?
to have him
Okay.
on a title like
Great.
that. Yeah.
Have you read this at all?
I have not.
Okay. You guys haven't read it at all?
No, I haven't
Okay.
read it.
Did you say that somebody has the credit for breakdowns?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Go ahead, Chris.
Layouts. So sometimes if artists have a pretty desperate schedule at times, there will be somebody else who does the basic design work of the page and where characters will be.
Okay.
Kind of like staging. Kind
So
of
like the storyboard artist.
yeah,
for the book.
storyboard
Okay.
artist, and then the main credited artist will go over
Gotcha.
add details, stuff like that.
Cool. All right. Cool. Constantine, the Hellblazer, is that what it's called?
Now it's called Constantine the Hellblazer. It used to be called John Constantine Hellblazer when it was from Vertigo. And then there was a Constantine book that I don't even want to talk about.
All right. Again, a topic for another day.
No, I've said enough.
Chris, what about you?
So I did start reading Bloodshot back at number 1 by Jeff Lemire, and I really did like it. I think I made it through number 5. I've just been falling behind on everything because of all the events and blah, blah, blah. And so the number 10 came out, and it's a brand new story arc by Jeff Lemire and Louis LaRosa on art. And it's really great jump on point because it jumps to the future, 30 years into their future, and it's Mad Max. It is very much Bloodshot as Mad Max, and it's great. It's a lot of fun. Louis LaRosa's art is very hyper-realistic at times, kind of has a nice painterly aspect to it.
Color scheme is very Mad Max.
Yeah.
Very
and,
deserty.
Yeah.
Yep.
All,
Sepia,
lots of
umbers.
beige and
Yeah.
yes.
And
those are-
elements of like different Valiant Universe characters are then like Shadow Man, who is a hero. Apparently his image has been twisted, and these mad marauders, the Shadow Men, roam around trying to steal everybody's water. And the Exo Manowar design has been stolen by like the dystopian, more science-heavy villains or culture. And there's like these patrol robots that all look like that. So it's just kind of like a neat what if Elseworlds future alternate story that's Mad Max with Bloodshot. And Bloodshot is he's kind of like a Punisher Wolverine mixed match. He's a soldier of fortune who was infused with nanites in his blood, and he can basically heal from anything. You can rip his head off and he's good. He's Deadpool. But he's I think he
Such a Deadpool.
predates Deadpool. I don't know. But it's a very interesting character, and Jeff Lemire is a very engaging writer. And so, yeah, I would recommend if you've never read anything about Valiant or Bloodshot, Bloodshot number 10 is actually a very solid jump-on point.
All right. Bloodshot Reborn. Start with number 10, apparently. And
I'll start with number 1.
Or, number 1.
all right, Nicole, what about you?
Well, I'm going to keep with the Valiant theme, and I read Valiant's the Valiant. Yes, okay. It's also written...
I'm trying to come up with a Smurf joke, but
Your face was priceless. And
I totally
thankfully
smurfed
we've
it.
gotten that on film, I hope. You smurfed it.
talk about Valiant the Valiant.
So it's also written by Jeff Lemire and some Matt Kint as well in there. And art is by Paolo Riviera and Joe Riviera. They work as a team. And the art is very beautiful inside. It's really a one and done event, but it also plays into a lot of stuff that happened afterwards and goes into the other event, Book of Death, after that. So you can keep going or not. And the great thing about Valiant is they always give you a little snippet of who's what. So, because I'm pretty new to Valiant, I read Faith and all that. but being still so new, it's nice to get that context. So anyway, this one is about the geomancers. There's always this entity that comes after the geomancers. The geomancers are mystics who are guided by the earth. And there's a new one, Kay McHenry, who she's struggling in her new role. She came out of doing something just totally normal, humdrum, and finds herself with these powers. And through the ages, the Eternal Warrior, who you've talked about in previous things, but he's been around for a very long time. He's got ancient and modern weaponry mastery, and he's sworn his life to defend the geomancer. So time and time again, he's found himself losing geomancers to this entity who comes back, I think, every 1,000 years. And so he's trying to protect Kay. And then in the meantime, a lot of other people in the Valiant verse, a lot of other superhero types, jump in trying to help in the fight. And it's the cool thing is it's got the supernatural element and with this entity that is coming after Kay, and it plays on your worst fears. So at certain points, everybody is privy to this entity taking over and showing them their worst fears and knocking them down. A lot of cool characters. Like, I'd have to say, I'm not really terribly huge into the superhero genre. It tends fatigues me, but having the supernatural element, having all these very interesting, very different kinds of characters, was very engaging. I think that the writing and the art, there was a good team on this project, and it makes me really excited to read more Valiant, which is good, because part of me is just a little apprehensive, thinking like, am I gonna like Valiant? I really want to, because I love Valiant, like, as people who work for Valiant.
And it has the goat in it.
It does. It has the goat from Quantum.
It's got the goat from Quantum.
You know,
and Woody.
I have a Hadus the goat in action.
The in action figure.
He has a little cape. Yeah.
All right. Who's the goat?
He's like the mascot for Quantum and Woody.
Yeah,
right?
he's just a goat that got like special powers because he was in the same place, same time, and the goat like teleports him to places, and yeah, he's great.
He's a little lockjaw-ish.
But he's not like a talking goat or anything. He's just this goat that's there.
But wasn't he shooting lasers out of his eyes there?
Yeah, there's this really great scene where they're all being shown all their worst fears. All the different heroes are being shown all their worst fears, and it's just this really cool, kooky kind of thing. But I don't want to give away too much, but it's really good, and if you know nothing at all, you can totally jump in and jump out if you want to. Very solid, very enjoyable, so highly recommend it. Looking forward to more Valiant.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I forget, Chris, did we do you yet?
Yeah, Bloodshot.
Oh, you did Bloodshot. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
Kids
why.
of Valiant.
We had 2 Valiants and a Constantine.
All right. So Valiant wins. All right. Well, that's Book Report. That's our show. But before we go, of course, we play quiz time. But before we do that, I want to tell you that the Perfect Down podcast is brought to you by The Panel Jumper. You can find out everything that Cole Hornaday and I do at thepaneljumper.com. Episode 4 is coming up pretty soon. I just recorded another actor's voiceover today.
Say, Ben Lawrence, is this a good time to ask people to mark their calendars for May 27th?
It's always a good time to do.
Okay, well, on May 27th, Ben Lawrence and I and these two other lovely people, I do hope, will be joining us for the Panel Jumper Live in Fremont. Friday.
Sorry, this is the first time
Oh, you guys didn't know anything about the... Yeah, we've been having... It's in the works. It's on the books. May 27th.
Okay.
I got to find people to take part, but, Ben and I know what we're doing. So, anyway.
So I hope you guys are free.
Yeah.
And
frantically looking at their calendars.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to hear about it this way. And also,
come on.
Also, Perfect Bound Podcast is brought to you by the Comics Dungeon here at 319 Northeast 45th Street, which is where we are, or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at comicsdungeon.com. If you want to find more episodes of the Perfect Bound Podcast, you can go to theperfectboundpodcast.com, or you can subscribe to us on iTunes, leave us a review, or any other RSS reader of your choice. But what else is there besides iTunes? And now it's quiz time. Today our questions come to us from Mr. Chris Casso. Lay it on us, Chris.
So because we talked about pulp comics, these are all questions that have to do with pulp fiction. So,
which is a little different.
It is. I was grasping at straws here. I'm sorry.
Good straw.
Yeah.
He was writing these questions as we got here today.
It's been a busy week. So, This hero hit the newsstands at nearly the exact same time as Batman in 1939, and publisher Thrilling Publications and DC Comics both claimed the other of being a copy. District Attorney Tony Quinn was blinded by acid thrown at his face and underwent an experimental operation on his eyes. Afterwards, he found he had acute vision, even at night, and a heightened sense of hearing, touch, and smell as the hero known as...
Captain Midnight? No.
The Black Bat.
The Black Bat.
Dude.
Well, he's Daredevil and he's Dr. Midnight.
Yeah, I was going to say, well,
I
that
can see
sounds
where they
like Matt Murdock.
Yeah,
Cool.
same time.
All right.
Okay,
Number 2.
DC Comics has had a few runs called Justice Incorporated, which followed what pulp action hero?
It's the Kenneth Robeson character.
You're on the right track.
Yeah.
I guess.
He's an
I don't- I don't know.
adventurer.
He's an adventurer. He can change his face. He's a master of disguise.
He's a pale
and
guy.
He's a pale guy with silvery hair, and I cannot remember his name.
The Avenger.
The Avenger.
These are all very kind of generic names because
Yeah.
everything came from them.
Right.
Okay, Batman's debut story, The Case of the Chemical Syndicate, was based on a pulp story written by Theodore Tinsley titled The Partners of Peril. This story featured another famous pulp hero named Kent Allard, a.k.a. Lamont Cranston, a.k.a.
The Shadow.
Yeah. So Batman pretty much came from the shadow.
Whoa.
Titled, four. Titled as the Master of Men, millionaire playboy Master of Disguise, Richard Wentworth could also disguise his voice, and as his by-name indicated, he could command people with his voice. His usual weapons of choice were a pair of Browning .45 caliber M1911 automatic pistols, and also carried a thin silken line which had a tensile strength of several hundred pounds. What was Wentworth's actual vigilante title?
The Spider, Master of Men.
Wow.
Yeah. This one's just
Got
because
a wow
we're
out of
talking
Ben
about
Lawrence.
pulps.
That's good.
The first credited pulp was published in 1896 by Frank Munsey with about 100,000 words, which is 192 pages or so per issue, on pulp paper with untrimmed edges, no illustrations, even on the cover. The steam-powered printing press had been in widespread use for some time, enabling the boom in dime novels. Prior to Munsey, however, no one had combined this cheap printing, cheap paper, and cheap authors. In 6 years, this publication went from a few thousand copies per month to over 500,000. What was the title of it? First credited pulp fiction.
Amazing Stories?
Good guess.
Oh.
Argosy.
Oh.
Argosy magazine. So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's quiz time, and that's our show. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Don't never apologize. Thank you for watching if you're watching, and tune in next week.